Just a scorched crater where lies used to live. And then they left. Fleet Command recalled Holt and his crew. The Blackthorn vanished into warp space, flanked by the surviving dreadnoughts, leaving nothing but ashes behind. But the war had only just begun. A week later, the retaliation came. 3 Council fleets stripped from the RB sectors, launched a direct assault on Earth's closest colonies, Kara Station and Lunar Relay 9. They thought the humans would panic, that Earth would recall its forces to defend its borders. They were wrong again because Earth wasn't defending anymore. It was hunting. The UN's Red Vulture, a deep space missile cruiser fitted with stealth tech and reverse-engineered alien jamming systems, intercepted the Council's fleet at even. Reached Karis. Under Captain Shaw, it didn't engage in a frontal fight. No honor, no broadcast. It dismantled the enemy fleet from Tyneside, hijacked their communication grid, blew up fuel lines mid-formation, hacked into their navigation, and redirected 3 warships straight into a sun's gravity well. When the Council finally realized what was happening, half their fleet was already gone. Therist fled. They limped back to Council space with nothing but horror stories and broken armor. And Earth, it didn't just cheer. It started building more Red Vultures. Inside the black halls of Earth Command, leaders didn't celebrate. They strategized. They understood now that the war had no rules, no front lines, no mercy. It was a cleansing. One species had drawn the line, and the rest would have to decide which side of history they'd die on. Commander Holt watched it unfold from orbit above Earth, his ship resting in dry dock for resupply. The stars outside didn't look peaceful anymore. They looked like targets. He joined him at the viewing deck, arms crossed. Intel says 3 more Council species are gearing up, mobilizing in the Delta sectors. Holt nodded. Let them. Fire's already lit. They'll just burn with the rest. She looked at him, not with concern, but with respect. You planning on stopping anytime soon? He shook his head slowly. Number not until the stars remember who we are. No tune till every treaty burned. The death list started appearing 3 days after Valixer burn. Encrypted broadcasts, no sender ID, no traceable origin, just names. Aliens, humans, hybrids. Every single one of them had a part in the treaty. Some were executioners. Others were silent benefactors, council members, CEOs, weapons scientists, collaborators, governors who closed their eyes while human colonies were erased and called it diplomacy. Earth stopped pretending to play politics. Now it played God. Every name in those lists had 48 hours. And they all knew what came next. Across Thesters, light started going out. The Bracken minister of Warfare, one of the architects behind the gene virus designed to target human respiratory systems, was found in orbit above Azalakar 6, flayed open in his own escape pod. No trace of forced entry, no escape logs. Just a single sentence burned into the glass of the pod window. We remember 3 hours later, a council spy lord, based in the merchant moon of Valtryk, was liquefied mid-broadcast. His neural uplink had been hijacked entering a transmission, and the feedback loop melted his brain inside his skull. The message that flashed across the screen, just before his eyes bled out, was even simpler. So do we. They tried to call Earth terrorists. Fanatics, rogue elements, but they knew the truth. It wasn't a rogue squad. It wasn't a handful of madmen. It was the system now. A coordinated state-sanctioned operation. A global consensus signed in blood and steel. Anyone who conspired in humanity's slow genocide would pay. No matter how long it took, no matter how far they ran, Commander Hall was back in deep space, standing in the war room aboard the UN's Blackthorn. It was no longer just a battleship. It had become Earth's mobile execution chamber. Around him, Dre, Rigg, and Grant stared at the newest dossier, a target on Ultrix Prime, an Axion ambassador who'd funneled tech and tactical data to the Council. Fleet under the guise of peace programs, disguised his shipments under humanitarian aid. Dre muttered, shaking her head. Fed intel on our Mars expansion to the Council. That data was used in the Helen massacre. Riggs spat. I was at Helen, that bastard's getting. His teeth handed to him, even if I got to pull them out one by one. Hall looked over the profile. He lives inside a civilian fortress, surrounded by an unarmed species, protected by neutrality laws. Grant folded his arms, so Holt nodded slowly. So we don't go loud, we go surgical. The Un's Whisper, Earth's newest stealth corvette, entered Eltric's prime orbit under the call sign of a medical aid vessel. No weapons showed on scans, not 3D ID, just a floating hospital. Another quiet miracle from Earth's benevolent outreach programs. No one questioned it. They wanted to believe humanity had calmed down. That maybe the outbursts were over. That maybe the fire was dying. But inside the Whisper, Commander Holt moved like a shadow. He was dressed in civilian gear. No armor, no insignia, just a tired man with a face that could disappear in a crowd. He didn't lead a team. This one was personal. The Axian ambassador, named Thal, lived in a glass spire above a neutral zone compound. The building was a monstrosity of false peace. Hanging gardens, meditation pools. He even had human servants, rescued slaves, he claimed, who were paid in coin and sanctuary. Hall entered through the public accessional. No alarms, no questions. The doorman, an old cybernetic Hallianst reptilian, nodded politely. Peace be upon your journey, traveler, he rasped. Hall didn't reply. He rode the lift to the top floor. Security scanned him, found nothing threatening. Of course it did. Holt had removed the metal from his body years ago. Neural wetware, ceramic. Encased weapons, micro-threaded jars under the skin. Nothing pinned. Trival stood at a curved window, sipping from a crystalline goblet. He was 7 feet tall, half-transparent, with the smug posture of a creature who'd never had to fight to survive. I assume you're here to discuss operations, Thal said without turning. My species was coerced into supporting the Council. I trust Earth. We'll be fair. Holt pulled the knife from under his sleeve and buried it in the base of the alien's spine. Trival gasped, jerking backward. The blade was designed for this. No sound, no splash, just pain and paralysis. Hall leaned in as the alien slumped to the floor. You smiled while humans died on Helen. Watched the footage at your feasts. Paid mercenaries to break our supply lines, and called it strategy. Trival tried to speak, blood bubbling in his throat. I'm not here to negotiate, Hall whispered. I'm here to remember. And then he twisted the blade until the alien stopped moving. On his way out, hadn't run. He walked. No alarms went off. No guards drew weapons. No civilians screamed. By the time his boots hit the hangar deck of the Whisper, the video had already gone viral. They'd recorded the whole thing. A perfect clean angle. No blur, no edit. Hall walking into a room with a monster. Hall walking out alone. The message was clear. No one was safe. Not anymore. Back on Earth, the civilian population did protest. There were no peace rallies, no campaigns begging for restraint. They had lost too much for too long. Fathers, sons, whole colonies. They wanted blood, and Hall gave it to them. Public support reached 97% approval. Crowdfunding sites popped up for covert missions. Civilians donated tech, weapons, even data. Some even volunteered for revenge squads. The politicians didn't stop it. They endorsed it. Earth was no longer part of the Galactic Council. It was something else now, something leaner and impossible to manipulate. The Council held an emergency session 3 weeks later. Only 17 species attended. The rest were either too scared to show up or were already dead. The speaker tried to hold order. A gelatinous thing with 20 eyes and a desperate voice. We must initiate sanctions. Blockades, if humanity is allowed to continue unchecked. A blast tore through the council chamber, not from a missile, from inside. A human, no armor, ever now. Just a former slave. One of their rescued humans the council used as workers and servants. He'd smuggled an Augrav shatter device inside his chest cavity, triggered it mid-session, took out the central delegation floor, and vaporized 3 council warlords. Fee footage leaked within minutes, captioned with one line, "We are not your pets. We are not your property. We are what you made us." And the galaxy began to break. Alliances cracked. The Trusari turned on the Karex, accusing them of withholding Earthstrike data. The Dorlans left Deconsil altogether and opened trade with Earth, calling them the only honest killers in the stars. Dozens of minor species followed. The old order collapsed. And Earth, it didn't celebrate. It built. Factories doubled output. Drone fleets expanded. AI Black Ops divisions grew under Project Scarhound, a shadow initiative dedicated to one task. Find every name. Finish every list. In a bunker beneath Earth Command, Holt sat in silence. His left hand bandaged from a fresh wound, an extraction gone wrong, but his iceware locked on the screen. The final page of the latest kill list glowed white. 5 names remained. 5 architects, the ones who had drawn up the blueprint for Earth's extermination 20 years ago. He cracked his neck, rolled his shoulder, and stood. "Let's finish this," he muttered, and the Blackthorn lifted from orbit once more. The 5 remaining names on Fellist weren't politicians. They weren't soldiers either. They were worse. They were the quiet ones, the masterminds, the think tank cowards who sat in sterile chambers with high-end liquor and detailed planetary kill counts, while someone else pulled the trigger. No glory, no battlefield scars, just spreadsheets of genocide. The Intel Halt had R. They named it the Celestial Concord, a pact forged to halt the endless wars. 40-7 alien species, each wielding fleets, colonies, and political daggers, signed their names in ink distilled from centuries of carnage. At the heart of it, all set Earth, the final species granted a place at the table. We were the youngest, the most reckless, the most feared. It hadn't always been that way. For a time, the galaxy dismissed us as savages fumbling with stolen machines. They thought we'd bend easily for trade deals and hollow promises of council seats. But every insult, every slight, only made us return louder, fiercer, and far more determined to ruin someone's day. And now, the Galactic Council dared to offer peace. True peace, they called it. A historic chance to end conflict and unite. The treaty would be signed in orbit above Velixir. An ancient, verdant world they claimed was sacred ground for diplomacy. Commander Grady Hall didn't believe a word. He'd seen the recordings the public never did. Vessels ripped apart without warning. Mining outposts wiped from charts. Accidents that only ever occurred when humanity advanced too far. They feared us, not because we were strongest, but because we refused to bow. So when the summons came, Hall ignored the Council's honeyed promises. He didn't trust peace built on desperation, and he sure as hell wasn't about to enter alien territory. Unguarded, he arrived armed. The UNS Blackthorn emerged from warp with 5 dreadnoughts in formation. Not escorts wolves circling a dark forest. Hall strode onto the Velixir platform with a sidearm strapped openly at his waist. His fellow captains mirrored him. The aliens bristled. A serpentine envoy of the Karex hissed as Hall passed. "This is a peace-gathering, human. Leave your weapons outside." Hall never slowed. "You welcomed us into your hall. We remember the last time." They knew exactly his meaning. A decade ago, at another so-called summit, 3 human envoys were vaporized mid-speech. The evidence erased, the crime denied, no alien punished. But humans remember, especially those who bury the fallen. Within the dome, beneath starlight chandeliers, and arches older than Earth itself, Hall faced the Grand Chamber. At his side stood Captain Mira Dre, cold-eyed and unyielding, Colonel Rigg, a living wall of war muscle, and Rear Admiral Grant Never Chun. We don't do chun here. Each bore one duty: refuse to sign until scanners confirmed the air was clean, the contracts untampered, and no hidden weapons stirred. But the snare was already sprung. As the high voice began speaking, a signal pulsed. Hall caught it only from a faint tremor in his neural link. Something was hijacking their system channels. The text looked like ceremonial updates, harmless static. Hall knew better. It was a kill command. Abort, he breathed into comms. Phase 3, lock and load. Around him, alien dignitaries smiled with practiced ease claws, mandibles, and teeth hiding lies. Then the chamber plunged into darkness. A single heartbeat of silence, sharp enough to taste mortality. And then fire erupted. It came from the rafters first. Automated plasma bolts streaking toward the human delegation. But Hall's team had already rolled for cover. Admiral Grant drew twin pistols in a blur, cutting down the first drone. Captain Dre barely flinched, snapping her exo-rig alive, raising a shield generator like she had rehearsed for this very betrayal. "This isn't peace," she growled through clenched teeth. "No," Hall replied, voice like steel. "This is justice dressed as mercy. And we brought the only answer they'll ever understand." He slammed his hand against a recessed console hidden in the delegation platform. In orbit, the UNSS Blackthorn caught the code. One beat later, Earth's contingency ignited. 6 orbital kinetic rods, each the length of a submarine, began their plunge. Peace was finished, but humanity was only beginning. Smoke writhed beneath the high arches like a breathing beast, thick and acrid, laced with the stink of scorched alloy and burning flesh. Alien cries tore through the chamber. Confusion, treachery, terror, not terror of death itself. Terror of humans. The instant the first plasma round flew, the hall transformed. It wasn't a chamber of treaties anymore. It was a killbox, and humanity had read the script long before curtain rise. Commander Hall crouched behind the fractured dais, shielding himself from another barrage. No panic, no wasted breath. Just cold focus as he keyed coordinates into his HUD and growled into comms. "Target uplink locked. 5 seconds. Watch for fragments." Above, the Blackthorn's payload fell. They called them Thors because when they struck, even gods bled. Solid tungsten. No explosives, no gimmicks, just speed, mass, and the fury of a species done with deception. Captain Mira Dre slid into cover beside him, dragging a bleeding tech behind a half-melted column. Her voice rasped. "Why not 10 rods?" Hall shook his head. 10 would have been forgiveness. This is a statement. A drone seared his shoulder with plasma. Pain lit his nerves, but he swallowed it, teeth grinding as he fired back. No cry, no weakness. Humanity didn't bleed in front of its enemies, not without drawing more blood in return. Then the earth itself thundered. Not from rifles, not from fleets. The first rod landed. Not on the dome, not yet. Hall had chosen the coordinates with surgical intent. It tore into Velixer's garrison, 5 kilometers south, the same base where strike teams lay in wait, ready to storm once humans were disarmed. Or so they believed. The ground convulsed like a living heart. A roar swept over them, low and consuming. Then a column of earth, fire, and twisted wreckage erupted skyward, a demonic tree of annihilation. The garrison ceased to exist. The shockwave rattled the summit walls. Panels blew loose. Columns screamed and split. Guards stumbled, their aim broken. That was all it took. Rear Admiral Grant surged from the flank, 2 Marine squads at his heels. Their rifles barked with machine precision, no war cries, no wasted noise, just clinical slaughter. First they cleared the balconies, shredding turrets and hidden snipers. Then they erased anything not armored in human steel. Confirmed breach, Grant's voice crackled. Chamber secured in 90 seconds. Colonel Rigg was already charging. He moved like a juggernaut, his armor forged for close-range carnage. A 12-gauge kinetic shotgun roared in his hands, reducing 2 slithering Carex guards to pulp before they even screamed. A third dragged itself away, spine shattered. Rigg crushed its skull beneath his boot. "Where's the council high voice?" He bellowed, "I want that coward breathing." His HUD scan painted a blinking marker toward the rear corridor. Halls. Grin sharpened. Running, of course. The bastard had bolted the moment the shooting started. Probably banking on his stealth craft. Probably had an escape tunnel carved beneath the chamber floor. Dre, cut him off. Rigg, with me. Holt slammed a fresh cell into his pulse rifle and stormed after the council's head diplomat. His boots crunched through shattered marble, crushing alien relics worth entire empires. None of it mattered. He wasn't here to preserve history. He was here to settle scores. Down the corridor, lights sputtered. Blood streaked the walls. One guard, some bird-faced functionary, lay slumped across a door, chest blown open. Holt shoved the corpse aside and hit the panel. Locked, irrelevant. He stepped back, fired his underlung breacher, and the door burst inward with a shriek of tearing metal and sparks. Inside was chaos. The high voice, a shriveled, gray-skinned thing wrapped in ornate robes, stood trembling at the far wall, a stolen sidearm quivering in his claws. "You brought war into a sacred hall," the creature shrieked. "You've doomed us all." Holt leveled his rifle but held the trigger. "Not yet. You wrote our death sentence with a grin. What did you think we'd bring? Flowers?" "You broke the accord," the alien spat. "There was no accord," Holt snapped. "Only a cage. We brought the cutters." Dre swept in behind him, rifle steady. "Contact inbound. Full strike team, orbital pods." "They're still coming." Of course they were. Holt's glare locked on the alien, voice like steel. "You staged this ambush, betting we'd roll over. You gambled on the soft, hopeful side of humanity. You forgot we're also the species that burned its own sky to win." He ripped the pistol from the alien's claws. "We don't forgive. We don't forget. And we don't kneel." He turned to Dre. "Stream love?" She nodded. "Every system's watching." "Good." Holt fixed his stare on the camera mounted above the doorway. "Every colony. Every species that believed humanity could be chained again. Let this stand as truth," he said, voice unshaken. "Earth did not come for peace. We came to endure. You tried to kill us. You failed." He lifted the pistol, fired once, and the high voice collapsed, robes flooding with alien ichor. Silence weighed the chamber. Holt glanced back at Dre. "Launch." "The last 2 Thors, shipyards." "Confirmed." Her wrist display pulsed. Rods 3 and 4 descending. 90 seconds. Far above, the UN's Blackthorn shifted its orbit. Earth's final card. It didn't bristle with cannons. It was the cannon of verdict hanging over worlds. Orbital rods slid into freefall. Not toward troops, not fleets, toward lifeblood. 1. Slammed into the Velixer shipyards, erasing the half-finished fleet meant to guard Earth's lanes. Another tore through a Tolkari supply hub. The same hypocrites funding pirate strikes on human colonies while preaching neutrality. Both sites vanished in fire and momentum back inside the fractured dome. Holt sank onto the broken steps of the council throne. His arm throbbed, lungs burned, but his eyes were still razor sharp. He knew what followed. The galaxy would come. Now, not shadows, not proxies. The real war. This was war, open and wild. But for the F. Your filth. The animals we should have put down centuries ago. Then why are Youth 1 in chains? He nodded once. Dre fired. No speech, no recording, just stone clean kill. The message was already known. There are no safe zones anymore. Not for those who plotted against Earth. 3 remain and they are running. Each one has their own bunker, their own little army, their own hideouts, defenses, escape routes. It doesn't matter. Earth has declared war without end. Holt stared at the stars from the Blackthorn's deck, his voice low but unshaken. They thought they were killing Aspices. They didn't know they were building one. Dre stood beside him, arms folded. We've become what they feared. No, Holt said. We've become what they deserve. The Blackthorn drifted above the fractured moon of Hilarion, one off the last neutral territory still operating under the illusion of diplomacy. Below, ash clouds curled over the jagged surface. Like the smoke from a funeral pea, the remnants of a failed rebellion, funded by enemies who had already paid with their lives. Commander Holt stood over the flickering hologram of the next target. Architect 3, Varndella. Species, Corin. Occupation, civilian mobilization strategist. Crimes, coordinated internal destabilization of Earth-loyal colonies through weaponized economics, famine algorithms and proxy cults. Status, at large. Location, unconfirmed. Suspected asset, the Scorch Protocol. But it was the last line of the data sheet that made Holt's jaw clench. Currently being sheltered by human collaborators on Titan. That was new. Earth's enemies had always been alien. This was something else. Dr. E leaned over the console beside him, voice clipped. The SIGINT confirms it. A faction calling itself the Titan Accord is sheltering Varndella in exchange for weapons, off-world transport rights, and anti-orbital shielding tech. Why would they side with him? Rig muttered, disgusted heavy in his tone. He helped starve. U.S. burned 6 colonies into the dirt. They think that Consil's making a comeback, Grant said. They think if they kiss the right alien boots, they'll survive the fire. Holt didn't say anything at first. His face was stone. Cold. Then, what assets do we have on Titan? Dre pulled it up instantly. Minimal. We pulled back most of our forward ops after the Helen incident. 1 agent embedded. No fleet presence. Accord's number about 1,200 strong. Lightly armed but dug in. Shield towers, surveillance arrays. Civilian zones are spread through the outskirts. Grant arched an eyebrow. They're hiding behind their own people. Rig cracked his knuckles. Doesn't matter. Hall nodded slowly. No speeches, no negotiations, no psychological operations. We treat them like the enemy they chose to become. He tapped the command line. Divert the Blackthorn. Titan just picked its side. The drop pod screamed into Titan's haze like fists from the heavens. 5 thunderclap impacts shook Theground across the main Accord base, scattering defenders, frying cameras, disabling their crude tracking systems. Holt's team came in behind them, tight, fast, ruthless. There was no resistance at first. The Titan Accord had expected threats, maybe embargoes, political pressure. They hadn't expected judgment. The UN's shock troops breached the first hangar like wolves let loose in a sheep pen. Every traitor with a weapon was gunned down. Those who dropped their rifles were zip-tied and branded for interrogation. No one got a pass. The Accord's leader, a former Earth Navy lieutenant named Creel, was captured trying to upload files off-world. Holt found him in the comms tower, fingers bleeding from trying to override the lockout on his data port. You knew who he was, Holt said quietly, pointing at the transmission log showing Varnell's last digital handshake. Creel didn't deny it. You think we wanted this? The man hissed. Earth's losing control. You're not fighting for survival anymore. You're turning into the Kamgu. Very thing we were afraid of. Holt didn't flinch. Number, we're fighting for justice. You just didn't like that justice includes you now. He turned to Rig. Take him outside. Creel screamed all the way to the wall. The intel they ripped from Titan Accord files painted a clear path. Varnella had been moved days ago. exfiltrated to an old asteroid cluster known as the Husk Rings near the Black Veil Expanse. No official Cologne records, just a string of abandoned mining outposts converted into intelligence black holes. Perfect place for a roach to hide. The Blackthorn rerouted again, deeper into the dead systems. Holt's fury didn't cool. It calcified. He manipulated humans. He growled. That's different. He's not just trying to kill us now. He's trying to divide us. He thinks if we start turning on each other, we'll forget about him, Drim muttered. He's gambling on us being soft with our own. Holt said, that ends Snow. The Husk Rings weren't pretty. Asteroids stitched together with docking cables and jury-rigged power systems. Rotating stations creaked like haunted ships in deep water. No communications, no response, just dead quiet. The UNS Vigilant launched ahead under blackout. Holt, Dre, and Grant made entry on the outermost ring with a xerograph glide team. Rigg took the underside flanks. His domain was breach and clear. They moved through old corridors built for miners long dead. Lights flickered. Gravity sputtered. Something about the platuriri of betrayal. Then they found it. Central Chamber Rheinfirst. The kind of place designed to survive a starquake. Inside, holograms flickered, maps of Earth, troop deployments, news feeds from Titan, and in the center sat Vendela. He wasn't armored. He wasn't panicked. He was waiting. You're efficient, the alien said calmly, his long fingers tapping the edge of his chair. I told the Accord you'd come. Holt raised his rifle. I don't need a speech. Then I'll give you something better, Della said. A choice that made Dre tense. He's stalling. Of course I am. Della smiled. I've already triggered 3 dead man protocols. One on the edge of your solar system. One inside the last loyal human satellite ring, and one he tapped his own just right here. A biometric trigger synced to his heartbeat. Holt didn't blink. You bluff like someone who doesn't understand what we've become. Della tilted his head. Oh, I understand. You're the monster now. The thing that never blinks. The thing that doesn't stop. You helped starve our children, Hall said coldly. You helped convince humans to betray their own. And yet you still hesitate to shoot, Della whispered. A pause. Then Hall turned to Dre, heart rate monitor. She activated her pulse disruptor and aimed. It squarely at Della's chest. The weapon fired with ass-off thump, a needle-thin bolt that froze his heart instantly. He gasped a dance, stiffened, then slumped forward, eyes wide. No explosion, no dead man code, just a corpse. Dre smiled. Guess he overestimated him, Wolfs. Like they all did, Hall said. They didn't upload the footage. Didn't need to. This wasn't for the galaxy. It was for Earth. Back on the Blackthorn, Hall reviewed the aftermath reports. The Titan Accord was dismantled. Collaborators rounded up. The faction's assets seized. Della's data core was decrypted, full of strategic sabotage plans and experimental psychological warfare blueprints designed to destabilize human unity. Everything had been a long play, a slow knife, and Earth had just snapped the blade. 3 Chittics down, 2 left. But the real change was something else. Humans had finally turned on humans, and they'd paid for it in blood. Hall stood alone in the command deck, looking out at the stars that had once seemed endless. Now they looked smaller, meaner, not because they had changed, because Earth had outrun fear. Dre approached, her voice low. We're not the same species we were when this started. We never were, Hall replied. They just woke up the wrong version. Rigg stepped in from the lift, blood still on his gloves. We ready for the next? Hall didn't answer immediately. He stared at the final 2 names glowing on his screen. One was hidden in the deepest council vaults. The other was already inside Earth's orbit. The last war hadn't started in orbit. It started in a boardroom under golden lights and champagne toasts. On Earth's most protected continent, surrounded beemen who'd never worn armor, but held the fate of billions in their polished hands. And one of them wasn't loyal. Holt stood in Earth Command's central chamber, staring at the last decrypted logs from Architect 4's data core. Feet text scrolled past in brutal simplicity. Coordinates, encrypted messages, falsified fleet manifests. But it was the last line that cracked something inside him. Asset D9 embedded in Earth. Human status operational. Rig leaned over the console, arms stiff. This can't be right. It is, Holt said flatly. Dre crossed the room, datapad in hand. Her jaw clenched. The Council wasn't betting on our extinction be force anymore. They switched tactics years ago. They banked on erosion. One traitor at the center guiding policy, blocking retaliation, rerouting supply chains, softening our backbone. Asset D9, Grant muttered, stepping into the room. Is Director Damon Rowe? Hall didn't blink. Of course it is. Roar was a name carved into. The foundation of Earth's survival, head of strategic allocation, hero of the Great Collapse, orchestrator of post-war recovery, and trusted advisor to every fleet admiral in orbit. But Roar had never fired a shot. Never stood in a trench. Never even left the safety of the Blue Zone's triple-layered luxury towers. And somehow that made him perfect for betrayal. Rig slammed his fist on the metal railing. He sat in on every deployment meeting, every retaliation. Operation. He signed off on the orbital strikes. Dra's voice was tight, and he delayed 90% of them. Remember the Holith Blockadetale? That was his override. It cost us 2 battalions. Delays, Holt murmured. Relocations, soft sabotage, always wrapped in red tape and civilian concerns. He turned towards the team.